The people who cut down trees for a living actually burn less wood than you do to stay warm. That doesn't make sense, right? They're surrounded by unlimited free firewood. So why is your heating bill higher than theirs? There's something they're doing that nobody talks about. Fresh cut wood is basically a sponge pretending to be fuel. I'm not exaggerating. That log you just cut from a fallen tree, 50% of its weight is water. Half. You're not burning firewood, you're trying to set fire to a wet towel. And here's what nobody tells you. When you toss green wood into your stove, most of the heat doesn't warm your house. It goes toward boiling off all that trapped moisture. You're basically running a steam room. Your stove spends all its energy drying the wood out instead of heating your home. Lumberjacks figured this out generations ago. They cut their firewood 12 to 24 months before they ever planned to burn it. That's not a typo. A full year minimum, sometimes two. They let the sun and wind do the drying work for free while they go about their business. But properly seasoned wood with under 20% moisture produces nearly double the usable heat as green wood from the exact same tree. Same species, same size, twice the warmth. That math changes everything. My grandfather used to say you're always heating 2 winters from now. Burn this year's cut and you're stealing from yourself. The good news? You don't have to guess. A simple moisture meter costs about $15 at any hardware store. Takes 2 seconds to check. Stick the probes in, read the number. Anything above 20% means you're literally sending heat up your chimney as steam. I bought one after I realized I'd been burning glorified water balloons for 3 winters straight. Embarrassing? Sure. But at least I stopped wondering why my woodpile disappeared twice as fast as my neighbor's. Now here's where it gets interesting. Dry wood is only half the equation. Because not all trees burn the same, not all firewood is created equal, not even close. Here's a number that'll make you rethink everything. A cord of oak produces roughly 29 million BTUs. The same exact volume of pine? 15 million. That's nearly half the heat from identical stack sizes. Choose the wrong wood and you do twice the work for half the heat. Lumberjacks rank their wood like a fantasy football draft. Hickory, oak, and black locust are the first-round picks. Their tight grain burns slow and steady, more like coal than kindling. These dense hardwoods throw heat for hours, while softwoods are already ash. Pine and spruce? They're the flashy rookies. Ignite fast, look impressive, burn out in half the time. Great for getting things started. Terrible as your main fuel source. But here's the real insider knowledge. On black locust is the secret weapon nobody talks about. This stuff grows fast, seasons quicker than most hardwoods, and burns nearly as hot as actual coal. Minimal smoke, too. My neighbor called it poor man's anthracite, and honestly, he wasn't wrong. The smartest approach? Mix them. One chunk of dense hardwood surrounded by lighter kindling creates a self-sustaining burn. You're not feeding that stove every 45 minutes like some kind of wood-burning babysitter. Want perspective? A single mature hickory tree can heat a well-insulated cabin for an entire month. Same size poplar might last 2 weeks. Same effort cutting it down. Dramatically different results. I spent years burning whatever fell in my yard. Maple, elm, random mystery logs. Some nights that stove roared. Others it barely whimpered. But having the right species is only part of the puzzle, because how you split that wood changes everything about how it burns. Here's where most people go wrong without ever realizing it. They split wood into random chunks, whatever size the axe decides, whatever shape happens to fall off the round. Then they wonder why their fire burns like a moody teenager. Hot 1 minute, cold the next. Lumberjacks don't guess. They measure. Every stove has a firebox with specific dimensions. The golden rule? Leave 2 inches of clearance on all sides between your wood and the walls. That gap isn't wasted space. It's your combustion zone. Block it and your fire suffocates while still eating through your wood. The sweet spot for most home stoves runs 4 to 6 inches across, small enough to catch flame quickly, large enough to hold heat for hours. Anything bigger just smolders and sends unburned fuel straight up your chimney. Wasted heat, wasted wood. Here's something nobody mentions. Shape matters as much as size. Triangular splits with one bark edge burn better than perfectly round pieces. Why? That pointed edge catches fire faster, while the thick end provides sustained fuel. It's like having built-in kindling attached to every log. I used to split everything into neat squares because it looked prettier stacked. My neighbor laughed at me for 3 winters before finally explaining the triangle trick. And those gnarly, twisted pieces full of knots? Don't torture yourself. Turn them into kindling. Wood split with the grain exposes more surface area to flames. Fighting against knots just creates dense chunks that burn like wet cardboard. Most homeowners never think about split size. That habit alone burns 30% more wood than necessary. But splitting perfectly means nothing if you stack it wrong, because what happens during storage determines everything about your burn quality. Now here's where storage becomes everything. Most folks throw their split wood against the house and call it done. 3 years later, they're burning soggy logs that hiss and spit like an angry cat. Meanwhile, their neighbor's wood dried in half the time. The difference? Airflow. Lumberjacks treat wood stacking like a science, because it is one. That pile sitting against your garage wall, it's trapping moisture between the logs and the siding. Mold grows. Termites move in, and your wood stays wet enough to disappoint you every single winter. First rule, never stack directly against any building. Leave at least a foot of breathing room. Your house will thank you. Your firewood will actually dry. But here's where it gets interesting. The bark up versus bark down debate has divided wood burners for generations. On bark up, sheds rain like a tiny roof. Sounds smart, except that same bark traps moisture underneath and slows drying from above. Bark down lets the exposed wood breathe and dry faster through the top surface. Then there's the spacing trick nobody mentions. Leave 6 inches between your rows. Just 6 inches. That gap lets wind pass through and turns a 3-year drying process into 18 months. You're literally cutting your wait time in half by doing almost nothing. The Germans figured this out centuries ago with something called the Holzmiete. It's basically a dome-shaped pile that sheds water naturally and creates airflow from the inside out. And whatever you do, avoid tarps wrapped tight around your pile. They trap humidity like a sauna and cause rot. A simple roof with open sides dries wood 40% faster. Speaking of faster fires, there's a lighting technique that changes everything. Most people have been lighting fires wrong their entire lives. You crumple newspaper, pile kindling on top, stack logs above that, light the bottom and watch smoke pour into your living room for 20 minutes while everything struggles to catch. Congratulations, you just did it backwards. Lumberjacks flip the whole thing upside down. Big logs go on the bottom, medium pieces in the middle, kindling and fire starters right on top. Then you light it from above. Sounds crazy. Works beautifully. Here's why. When flames burn downward, they preheat everything below. Moisture gets driven out of those larger logs before they ever ignite. By the time fire reaches them, they're practically begging to burn. Traditional fires send unburned gases straight up the chimney as gray smoke. Wasted fuel. Top-down fires burn those gases on the way up instead. Oh, nothing wasted. I switched 3 winters ago. A well-built top-down fire runs 4 to 5 hours without touching it. Traditional fires? Maybe 2 hours before they need attention. That's 25% less wood over an evening just by stacking differently. And the weirdest part, this works even when your wood isn't perfectly dry. Scandinavian foresters have used this method for centuries in emergency situations. The slow downward burn gives moisture extra time to escape before combustion. Building one takes practice. 3 or 4 large splits on the bottom, parallel, cross the next layer perpendicular. Repeat with smaller pieces. Top with kindling and 2 fire starters. Light both starters. Walk away. First attempt might look ugly. Second attempt clicks. Third attempt makes you wonder why nobody taught you this 40 years ago. But even perfect fires waste heat if your damper isn't cooperating. Your damper is basically a gate between your money and the sky. Leave it wide open, 80% of your heat flies straight up the chimney. You might as well toss dollar bills into the fire. At least that would be entertaining. But here's where most people mess up. They slam the damper shut too early thinking they're saving heat. Wrong move. Close it too early and you create creosote. That is the sticky, flammable buildup inside your chimney that causes house fires. Not exactly the savings you were hoping for. The trick is what old-timers call the 20-minute rule. Open that damper completely when you first light up. Let it roar. Get those flames hot and angry. You want a solid bed of orange coals glowing at the bottom. Then you dance. Reduce airflow by about half. Watch the flames. You're looking for active orange fire with occasional blue tips flickering at the base. That blue means gases are burning completely instead of escaping as smoke. Blue equals beautiful efficiency. I spent 2 winters burning wood before someone showed me this. Felt like I'd been driving with the parking brake on. Now here's something worth knowing. Modern EPA-certified stoves have secondary combustion chambers. They reignite the smoke before it escapes. That alone pulls 30% more heat from the same logs. 30%. from the same logs, just by letting the stove do its job while you manage airflow correctly, and the smoke tells you everything. White smoke, moisture escaping. That's fine early on. Gray smoke billowing out, you're losing unburned fuel, nearly invisible exhaust. Perfect combustion. You've hit the sweet spot. But the damper dance takes practice. But master it, and your woodpile suddenly lasts weeks longer. Speaking of lasting longer, there's another trick involving thermal mass that changes everything. Here's where old world wisdom meets physics. Lumberjacks in the coldest regions figured something out generations ago. They didn't just heat the air, they heated the walls. Stone, brick, concrete, materials that soak up warmth like a sponge and release it slowly for hours after flames die down. Think of it as a thermal battery. My neighbor has 1,500 pounds of soapstone surrounding his wood stove. Sounds crazy until you realize he lights one hot fire in the morning, another in the evening, and his house stays warm all night. Meanwhile, I used to feed my stove every 3 hours like it was a hungry teenager. Dense materials soak up heat while the fire burns. Then they slowly release it back into the room for hours after the fire dies down. Soapstone releases heat slower than almost anything else you can build with. Home feels like warm sunshine on your skin even at 2 in the morning. Finnish and Russian immigrants brought these masonry heater designs to American logging camps in the 1800s. These weren't decorative fireplaces, they were survival tools. When temperatures hit 40 below, efficiency wasn't optional. But here's what most people miss. You don't need a massive European masonry heater to capture this benefit. Start small. Place a few large stones or bricks near your existing stove. Even a couple cinder blocks positioned behind the unit will grab heat that would otherwise float toward the ceiling and vanish. That captured warmth extends your fire's usefulness by hours. The real trick? Burn hot and fast instead of low and smoldering. A quick, intense fire charges your thermal mass completely. Then the mass does the work while you sleep. But thermal mass isn't the only thing you've been throwing away. Your ash pile holds secrets too. Most people treat wood ash like garbage. Scrape it out, dump it, forget it. Lumberjacks do the opposite. They guard that ash bed like it owes them money. Here's why. A 1-inch layer of ash at the bottom of your stove acts like insulation for your coals. That gray powder keeps embers alive while you sleep, while you eat breakfast, while you pretend to work from home. 12 hours later, those coals are still glowing. And glowing coals mean your first log of the day catches in seconds. No kindling, no newspaper. My grandfather called this banking the fire. He'd load up the stove at 10 at night, close the damper halfway, and wake up to a firebox still warm enough to cook on. One match lit his morning fire. Meanwhile, I used to clean my stove spotless every few days. Bare metal. Looked beautiful. It also meant I started every single fire from absolute zero, wasting kindling and time like they were free. But there's a catch. Too much ash suffocates your fire. The sweet spot sits between 1 and 2 inches, enough to insulate. Not enough to choke airflow. That ash you have been throwing out can reach 1,000 degrees when coals are buried inside it. Free heat, straight in the bin. And here's a bonus that has nothing to do with heating. Quality hardwood ash works better than salt for melting ice on walkways. Doesn't kill your grass either. Toss it in your garden and tomato plants go absolutely crazy from the potassium. Nothing wasted. Everything serves a purpose. That's really the whole philosophy here. Lumberjacks don't have secret knowledge. They just stopped throwing away advantages that most of us never knew existed.